price that freedom's costing. Peace to Benny Lee, because he made his own law, son. And welcome back to the Back Then When podcast. I'm your host, Clay Gregory. I got the whole team with us. Who we got?
Hello, everybody. I'm Thax.
Hey, everybody. E. Taylor here.
Man, I'm having a ball with this podcast thing, man. I'm Mustafa, y'all.
My bad. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about a real sensitive subject in the black community, especially around black men, you know, with an emphasis on DC, the Back Then When podcast. We're going to talk about mental health, okay? And what does that look like? What does that mean? And I'm gonna start with something from our generation, right? Mm-hmm. So, one, people would throw around the word crazy, right? Man, that Bama crazy. Yeah, right? Oh, he lunching, right? Those are the terms that we would throw out on a regular basis. And then we started getting a little older, and then they, PCP, of course, was a hot narcotic in the city. One of the number ones, right? And they would talk about butt naked, right? And it was like, man, that dude was smoking that, then he was,
Running up
New York Avenue butt naked, right?
He was
and the other thing they talk about is somebody taking a bad trip and they never coming back, And it was like the stigmatism behind someone taking a bad trip and never coming back. Like, can y'all remember people who was our generation who they would say that about?
Yeah. I mean, y'all wouldn't know him, but I grew up with a guy like that. One of my friends, innocent kids collecting Essence tapes. That was our thing. We was Essence tape dudes.
Yeah.
And then one day, it was that, hey, man, let's smoke some boat. I'm like, man, I ain't messing with it. But he smoked it and lunched out. And I'm talking lunched out for a few years after that. You know what I'm saying? Dippers, boat, just all those things. Just, it kind of took control of his soul. He finally weaned his way off of it, about 5-10 years later. But during that 5-10 year period, he was gone, bro. And it was my friend, you know what I'm saying? I always remember that, and I was like, okay, I'm glad I never tried that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Those were the days, man. I can remember being down the High Theater and seeing a dude on the balcony. He smoked the boat.
Right.
Yeah. And they had to run up there to save him because he was about to jump off
the
like
balcony.
he was in
I heard people
did
did jump off.
I was in there one night. I'll never forget. And I remember them grabbing a dude. He was off the PCP.
But that's another thing we don't talk about. It started with our music. Y'all don't remember when EU had the thing, what y'all smoke? What y'all smoke?
Love boat. That's right. I remember
it
that.
happened with the music.
Yeah.
And you don't blame it.
Yeah,
I'm not blaming it. I'm not
can't
blaming
do
it,
that.
but it made it seem acceptable. Same thing with drill rap. Same thing with drill rap. It made it seem acceptable. That it was cool to get high, go to the go-go, book abroad, have fun, dance all night.
Yeah.
We didn't know what we was doing back then.
Everybody knows Smoke Boat didn't listen to that song.
But I mean,
smoking it heavy.
It was. I just remember hearing on tapes back then. What y'all smoke? What y'all smoke?
Love boat. What y'all smoking? I remember that.
I never experienced the actual butt naked dude, running around. But I did know a couple of jokers that was experimenting. And all I never remember is them being strong as strong. You ain't want to get into it with them, Slim.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't do nothing with them.
Yeah.
He was off that shit. They all, and especially a dude that already could rumble a little bit. It was like they turned into Superman.
He couldn't feel anything.
I'm gonna say this, and I tell a little bit of like part of my background. Christine and I, we have a behavioral health company. So what we do is we support people who have psychosis and who are dealing with addiction and need drug counseling and mental health services. Like that's what we do. And yes, they are. I don't know what the history is behind somebody smoking Love Boat and needing to take off their clothes, but when a person is in psychosis, there are a number of different ways in which that presents itself.
What does psychosis mean?
Psychosis means is that you're not in your right mind. I guess that's probably the easiest way to put it.
Right from wrong, pretty much.
Literally. And you're just not in a conscious state where you're able to understand and live within the social norms. And when someone is living outside of the social norms, and there's a lot of stuff in there I'll probably just hold tight from just sharing right now. But when somebody's in that space, it's not unnatural for them to want to take their clothes off. So the whole concept of somebody getting butt naked, doesn't have as much to do with the fact that they're high off of PCP.
So it's
a myth there.
Pretty much it's not in the substance that made them real hot, body-wise, temperature-wise, or nothing like that. You don't.
Like if we were to put up a case of 100 cases,
Yeah.
It is possible that a person, their mind could register if they are on a narcotic, that their body temperature is hot, so they want to take off their clothes.
Okay.
But if someone is not in their right mind, it's not like I'm going through psychosis. So, the next thing is I want to get butt naked.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So it doesn't work like boom to boom. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But just looking at, that's just one element, and we just bringing this up to talk about mental health issues, right? We know those are the extremes. But how many of our brothers, how many in this area are struggling with mental health issues?
Probably a lot.
Yeah.
Probably undercounted, because one thing about mental health, people, you don't know, because it's an internal thing. So we wouldn't know, but it's probably a lot.
And a lot, we just didn't grow up in a time where, in our communities, where we said, you need some help.
Right.
Like you said earlier, Clay, that man crazy. That nigga lunching, you know what I mean? That's what we did. That was normalized. You know what I'm saying? We just knew what the limit was with that person. You know what I mean? And I grew up on the street, down the street from Coolidge, and we had the National Children's Center, where it was a halfway house thing for some guy, people that were, considered, they used to use the word retarded back then, you know what I mean? We don't
Can't
use
say
that
that
word,
no more.
you know what I mean?
The R word.
But that's what they used to say back then,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And we used to play with them. We used to play football with them and stuff like that, and, we knew that they had some issues, but we didn't treat them like that, you know what I mean? So we accepted it, you know what I mean? And we didn't consider ourselves in that same predicament. So, we would just, once we leave, stop playing, we didn't think about them anymore.
Yeah.
And, and we would go through things. We grew up with a lot of death.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, first time I saw somebody killed, I was 13. I actually saw somebody killed. You know what I mean? So just think about that. I'm 53.
That's deep.
From 13,
Yeah.
then you go through them rest of them teens. I've seen a lot of
That's deep. That's deep.
And,
And I'm gonna circle back to that because I got something I want to ask you this. But Thaxton, I'm gonna ask you a question. So DC, you can't think of DC and landmarks. You think of, especially our community, right? And not think of growing up what St. Elizabeth, St. E's meant to our community. Like when you think of St. E's, what's the first couple things you think about as far as DC?
Man, I often think of Hinckley. That brings me back. I remember they used to have a package, a boat called Hinckley. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because
And
it's
for those who
St.
don't know,
Elizabeth's.
Hinckley's the one who tried to shoot. He shot.
John
Actually, he
Hinckley.
shot.
Yeah, he shot
John Reagan,
In front of
and he
the
spent
building.
all his. He lived up in at St.
E's
Elizabeth.
for years.
Hey man, I got a personal story at St. E's. My aunt used to work there, and you know how your aunt take you to work with her sometimes.
Yeah.
And you go in there, the stairs are caged off, and you walk in there. But then I got scared because I was young. When you're young, you don't realize. You don't want to say people are crazy, but you got people. Their hair's not combed, their nose is snot. And I was scared, but I was like, no, these are people. They're regular people. They're just in a different state right now. That was my experience with St. E's. I always know St. E's to be the hospital for the insane. That's what it was growing up. It was the hospital for the insane.
We stayed away.
Yeah.
But you had a situation where your aunt took
Yeah,
you.
my aunt
We
took me
stayed
to
away
work.
from St. E's.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So
And that was the whole thing. The concept was
Stayed away.
stay the hell away
That's what I
from
was
St.
saying.
Elizabeth.
That's what
Like
I'm
and in the 80s, it ain't do no favors that all of those horror movies was based off of somebody breaking out of an
insane asylum.
insane asylum, right? And so like that created this narrative and extreme. The other thing is like back in the turn of the century, like so. In the early 1900s, 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, if someone had a mental health breakdown and they sent them to St. Elizabeth Hospital, chances are you're going to spend pretty much the rest of your life there. Now, times have changed now where there's this thing which is considered community supports. So what that is instead of putting somebody in St. Elizabeth, because the thing is, you just put them in an environment like that, it's difficult for them to really get themselves back together in rehab. So now what they do is they provide services. They want to keep people in their house, in their home, or they put them into like a group home because they want to keep them engaged with the community, right? But that's a whole lane that people duck, right? But going back to like our childhood and what develops like mental health issues, I'm gonna ask you guys this: when we was all youngers and like the high school age, and there was a friend who was going through like a breakup with his girlfriend, right? And so he was crying, he was heartbroken. Y'all remember them days? What would be the advice that y'all give y'all
Man,
friend?
oh, fuck that bitch. What you crying over abroad for? That
Right.
was automatic.
Yeah.
Of course, in hindsight,
Yeah.
that's terrible.
Terrible
we
advice,
supposed to
right.
be there for our own,
Right,
you know what I mean?
right.
But that's how we programmed. We were programmed like that. Don't
Yeah.
ask me how, but it was just, I don't know where we got that from. Honestly.
Yeah.
I ain't gonna lie. I cried over the bra before.
We all did at some point.
I was that
That's what
dude.
you said.
Yeah.
No stuff.
Yeah.
So, did you have a homie that, like, was, hey, man, come on, man, it's gonna be all right, man.
Yeah.
We wasn't doing that.
Yeah.
Eric, remember that boy that went to Wilson? He killed himself over that girl back when we was in high school.
Yeah,
It was
man.
tough, man.
It was tough.
All those. I seen a dude the other day. Y'all talking about St. Elizabeth. I seen a dude who went to St. Elizabeth in 1982. I saw him the other day on 12th Street. That's what he was doing. Selling fragrances for cars. He's still mentally messed up from something that happened that he launched out on off the PCP. And I just saw him about 2 weeks ago.
Say that,
PCP take
sometimes
people over
you
there.
can recover.
Yeah,
But
they
see,
don't recover.
this gets back to the myth. The myth is that the trigger of his mental health disorder is PCP. But we don't know that. Like unless somebody were to show like his whole mental health history, we couldn't know whether or not it was a PCP incident.
So
and that-
scientifically, there's no proof that this drug can actually do something permanent to your brain that wasn't there before.
So here's the thing, because I'm not an expert on that area, so I don't want to speak matter of factly on that level.
Okay.
But I will say this, that like, so the brain is the brain is plastic, and what that means is that it can grow, it can evolve, it can develop. Just like it's just like somebody who's gone through a blunt trauma, somebody who's been shot, who's gone through a car accident, right? You can heal those wounds. So even if you smoke something that were per se to injure a portion of your brain and create like a TBI, traumatic brain injury, it can heal, it can recover from that. So the thing is that the idea, and that ties into like neuroplasticity, right? So we're always growing, we're able to change and evolve. But the fact is that it's not like somebody can smoke and then, be permanently. I would just say that the people who would smoke PCP or something like that and be permanently damaged is probably a small percentage.
Okay.
I didn't know that.
We sure didn't.
I didn't know that.
He's gone forever, like you said.
Yeah.
Point of no return.
That's right.
He ain't coming back.
I think
That trip, you're
that's
not coming back
debatable
from that
because
trip.
I know back in the day, I know dudes who used to smoke PCP. And one thing about smoking boat, the joints are very, very thin. They're very thin because you can't you're not supposed to smoke boat the way you smoke a blunt.
Right.
You smoke a boat the way you smoke a blunt, you're gonna definitely lunch out and maybe die. So
That thing is potent. That water, this and the water.
Potent.
I used to be over water place.
Bomber
Though,
fluid.
this is like 90, 91, and we had a water connect. And man, we used to get the water, gallons of water, and go to Safeway and get the Lipton 100 tea bags, and just soak it down. We was selling tea bags.
Oh, y'all
The
selling
water
tea?
was so fucking strong.
yeah, that was
Killing
the
it.
water. The water was the
Off
drug
the chain.
because it ain't nothing
You
but regular
understand?
weed
Yeah.
with
It's embalming fluid.
right with water on it. That's
It's
basically
embalming
what it is.
So
fluid.
imagine it with the weed, you know what I mean?
Okay, so let me bring up something else. When you think of fentanyl, right?
Oh, my
Do you think would you assume that fentanyl, as far as the chemical makeup, is worse? I mean, that you think that water is worse than fentanyl?
No, not at all. Fentanyl killed my sister.
Okay.
My sister was an addict all her life.
Right.
And she had a run-in. She's been getting lucky all them years.
Yeah.
And she had a run-in a few years ago with some fentanyl.
Bad batch or just fentanyl?
We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know, but it was laced with the fentanyl.
Yeah.
Took her right out. She bled out.
Mm.
She bled out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And my mother found her, which caused my mother depression. So this is this mental health thing that my mother was, that was passed down to me from my mother.
Yeah.
She did not believe in therapy or getting help, so she found my sister, and we don't have proof, but we attribute her depression and not being able to get out of her depression from finding my sister like that. You know what I mean? So I had to deal with that. You know what I mean? I lost both of them. You know what I'm saying? Now I'm sitting in a situation where I got to keep going every day. You understand what I'm saying?
Because you got a family, you got a son.
I need
Yeah.
I need that therapy. You
Yeah.
know, and the only therapist I've had is my wife. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? But I know she's not a professional.
Right.
You know what I mean? She's doing the best she can when I do bring it up. But I need professional help.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that was something that I had to admit to myself because my mother was like, we don't
Yeah.
believe in that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I was just about to mention that. You said your mother said we don't believe. See, but that's how it's always been for us as black people. I just read a stat. It says 21% of black Americans have mental health concerns, but only 39% receive service because of the way we think.
Yeah.
Like going to the doctor.
Yep.
Man, I'm all right.
And what
It takes some
did
ass.
that come from?
I
Is
don't
that
know.
a generational thing?
So
Yeah, I
let,
think
let
so.
me let me just I got part of a theory, right?
Yeah.
So if you think of our population coming out of slavery and then going into the main economy, right? So no longer needing to earn money to live. The people that you work for, they ain't give a crap whether or not you were dealing with grief.
Absolutely.
You lost your child, you dealing with somebody sick. Like, could you perform or not? And so the thing is, for probably a lot of those parents, it's like, I don't need my child. I don't want to raise a child that's going to need to take a pause from surviving
Keep up. Right.
to
Got
keep
you.
up.
Got you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And another thing, if you don't have insurance, it costs, right?
Yeah.
So, but that could have been something my mother never said or admitted to because she's struggling.
That's
Yeah.
another
What I mean?
stat.
She was like, hey,
Yeah.
I can't do it.
All right, so
You know what I mean?
let's dive a little deeper into this because I'm gonna throw out some terms that are used in mental health, and I want to see whether or not y'all think that our brothers are dealing with this and the impact that it had on them. First one, PTSD.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
We're dealing with PTSD that's in our DNA, first of all, from our ancestors,
Right.
their situation, and the PTSD from how we
Growing
grew
up
up
in
in
DC.
the crack epidemic.
Ooh.
We're dealing with it from all angles.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
You talk about PTSD. If you go to the hospital, there's a program that we support in one of the hospitals, and we're talking about individuals who are victims of violence, shot, stabbed,
Post-traumatic.
beaten to a point where they need hospital services for rehab. Do you think? Are we agreeing that those individuals will have PTSD? Right.
Of course.
Okay. Here's the next one. Survivor's remorse.
Definitely.
As far as black men, do you think that we struggle with the idea that their brothers of ours who we grew up with and they lost their life or got incarcerated when they were 20, 21, 22, 23, and there's a guilt that we feel because we got to live on?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if I would describe it as guilt. It's more, to me, it's like it's a sadness from
Right.
just like, damn, we think about those years. We got homies that just coming home from 38 years. That's your life. You know what I mean? And it's like, and I dig deep when I'm thinking about that because I'm like, damn, y'all was eating. Who was you eating for all them years and stuff? I think about stuff like that, man. And, no real. The technology and everything has moved so fast throughout those years, and you come out and a lot of guys that come out from those long beards, they don't sit here and say, man, I need you, man, I need your help. They have grown into full-grown men from they, like I said, before their brains weren't fully developed when they went in.
Yeah.
So they developed inside the pen.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And they come out to a whole new world.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's deep. I remember I met a dude inside, right? He told me he got locked up in 1966. I said, what? Man, I'm looking out of the parking lot because we inside the
Yeah.
He never saw a car. He didn't drive a car, of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
but he didn't Lexus, and he didn't know about Lexus or
Yeah.
Infinity, because mind you, this is late 90s.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's like, man, I've been in for 30-some years, and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of how,
But that's-
it's
that's
the little
serious.
things, bro, he couldn't do.
So think about that mentally,
Yeah.
Yeah, that messed a lot of people up.
It's so many things that I believe we need serious help for.
Okay.
You know what I
Alright.
mean? Especially coming from where we come from.
And circling back on that PTSD, do you know that in 88, 89, and 90, DC was the murder capital of the world?
Yeah.
Meaning we had 400, 500 murders.
And that
Like,
was
it's-
just the
it's-
murders. That wasn't
Right.
the shootings. And
Matter of
on
fact,
top of that,
I'm gonna
then
even
that's-
I'm gonna get more specific than that. That was young black men. Now, when I say murder, I'm not talking about everybody. I'm talking
Yeah.
about specifically 500 murders of young black men.
It wasn't
And
these random accidents
Right, right.
where a child might get killed from a,
Right.
a
These-
drive-by
these-
and
these
stuff
were
like
targeted.
that. Back then,
when?
homies, back then when
Yeah, it was
homies was
real.
getting up on their man.
yeah.
You was
yeah.
going to target was going to get got.
Yeah.
You
That's
know
right.
what I'm saying?
That's right.
Barbershops, wherever.
I was telling somebody earlier, I said back then it was organized chaos. Today it's unorganized chaos.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Back then it was organized chaos because it was a subset that was young black men that was dealing with that. It wasn't all over the place like it is nowadays. It was a subset. And to think about it, I just told y'all, I just said we had 500 murders in 1990. Y'all didn't even budge. Y'all didn't even move.
We used to.
Because
Yeah.
it's a way of
Yeah.
I'm
life.
saying,
Experienced
hold on.
that.
You say it's white life, but guess how many murders we have now? 100, 200, and
Yeah,
it's
they-
nothing.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
It's a
But back
lot.
then,
Think about those
we came up with those 500
Think about those
murders.
the 90s on.
For
up.
years.
Yeah,
Like
but-
98.
yeah, but
didn't
the
stop.
murder rate subsided in the 90s.
Yeah,
but
but-
88, 89, 90, it peaked.
Yeah.
Right.
With 91 being the
I'll
worst year in
I'll
DC.
go even worse, Eric. I can say 86 to 90 was the worst.
Yeah, 86 to 90 was
'Cause that's
off the
when it
chain in
really
DC.
started.
Off the chain.
You know how significant that year 86 is?
Lynn
The crack
Biles
hit the year
died.
before. The crack hit
Yeah.
the year
It
crack
changed.
hit our
DC
city
changed in 86.
The year before.
It went from
1985.
innocent to not innocent no more.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah. That's why that's significant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you think
And a
about
lot of
all
us are
those
still
years,
dealing with it because it's a way of life. We're used to it.
But
We're
that's
used to
the
seeing
PTSD.
somebody
That's
go to
the
jail.
PTSD.
for
That's
20
the
years.
We
PTSD.
glossed over it.
But that's
Yeah.
the
'Cause the whole-
PTSD because
That's the
that's the
PTSD.
PTSD
We
because
still
it don't
dealing with
impact us. It don't make us go, damn. You know what I'm
we're
saying? We
watching
kind of
it
like
we're used to it.
We're used to it, and
We're
that's the
watching
part
the
that's
effects from that time now with
Yeah.
the younger generation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because
You know, what, there's a saying that says that what doesn't break you makes you stronger. But to put that in perspective,
true?
there's some truth in that, right? The fact is that if you overcome something, then that gives you, like you survive it, right?
a little bit more leverage in
If
your
you
life.
break your arm, the area in which your arm heals back, it's your body sends a lot of what it needs to heal. So the specific spot that you broke, like if you're a healthy person, is stronger than other parts in the bone. You know, because it sent so much healing to it. So what doesn't break us, or something that we overcome, does make us stronger. But here's the problem with that, right? Is the fact that, like, when we're talking about survivor's remorse, we're talking about like how you said, you become desensitized to violence.
that's the word.
You know, and that also gets to the whole sense of, like, you know, if the guilt that we feel, right? Because I don't know if you all are the same. I know you guys have had the same experience, but there was a point as a young man where I really didn't expect to live.
Oh, what?
Absolutely. And
What's
some
that
of
about?
Some of
What?
that was from my behavior. It wasn't just because I randomly might come outside and something happened to me. It was what, you know, I had a good year and a half of, I was lunching. You know what I'm saying? I would be considered lunching, the shit I was doing. You know what I mean? So that was that time though. Again, dealing with an underdeveloped brain. You know what I mean? And that's all mental shit. It's like, you know, and some of it is you know, we wanna drive off that fear and stuff like that, and we just doing shit out there. You know what I mean? So it's like that's why, again, that village is so important. That village that, you know, in our communities is so important because we need people on us. We needed people on us. You know what I mean? It just got out of control. It got out.
I can remember, so I'm older than all of y'all, we know that, right? But I can remember back 85 when really people didn't know, but age was starting to pump up. So we was living with violence and age.
Jeez, yep.
So I remember we would take a drug, a age test, and we celebrate, man, I got a new life. But look,
Scared to death.
just waking up for New Year's, we used to celebrate, man. We used to celebrate not because we go down to Chapel. This is, man, 87, we go down there to celebrate because we're living.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We was young, but we was like, man, because every day is sitting on the seats.
Yep.
This person got
Sit in
killed.
the seats.
This
Yeah,
person
yeah,
got killed.
that's
You
all
like,
I
I
saw.
know, damn.
You know what I mean?
We used to
That's all
read the
I saw.
newspaper to see who
Metro
we
section.
the
knew.
Metro,
The
right?
Metro section.
Just
See who
see.
we knew who might have lost their
And
life.
some of, you know, some of those guys, it was an impact. It was a serious impact of some of the people we lost. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They was close friends, and you know, see them, talk to them every day, and they, you know,
Every day.
just like that. Boom.
You
So
seeing
long.
it yourself.
So
You
that-
right in front of it.
You know, so and you grow up and you get older, and you haven't even discussed this with anyone. You know what I mean?
Yep.
How you felt about that, or
Yeah.
how it has made you, you know, move forward. It was only a few years, because I grew up fighting. We all grew up just fighting, you know. I never thought about picking up a gun or none of that.
Testosterone.
You know what I mean? And it was like 89. Me and I had a good homie, Gary Terrell, and we that was my homie, right? And we went to Carroll together, and it was like 1988, and we was up Carroll together, and you know he used to get on me because I was in Carroll lunching because I ain't like the fact that I was around all dudes at the time, and he was like, man, you guys will stop acting like a fucking fool in this Catholic school. I mean, the dude was smart as hell, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
He get straight A's and everything. Just smart. We grew up around some smart dudes, man.
Yeah.
And Garrett's brother ended up getting killed. Brandon ended up getting killed. I think it was 89. And then it flipped because Garrett wasn't the same. I had to be on him. Like he was lunching. I mean, in my opinion, he was, you know, trying to go on some suicide missions for revenge.
Right.
Right? And I said, man, and this was, he was staying up in Georgetown. He had a little condo, little apartment up in Georgetown. And I used to go up in there, you know, back and forth. And, you know, I would see some guns and stuff. And I'm like, he didn't used to carry guns and stuff like that. And I started
Yeah.
seeing a lot of guns.
Yeah.
I said, Gary, man, you tripping, man.
How
I
was his
said,
brother killed?
that he got killed with the rifle situation.
barbershop?
Lil Nut killed Brandon. Columbus.
Okay.
That was in the barbershop?
No,
He got killed at a chapter.
Chapter
Oh,
3.
yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah. I was down there.
He,
So we're talking definitely that's a sign of PTSD type situation.
and I knew, and I, you know, we kind of had to part. Long story short, we kind of had to part ways because he was trying to recruit me, and I wasn't ready mentally at the time to pick up no gun, and especially going to these dudes. You had these just rifle crew,
Yeah.
Migo and Tonio and Jerry and Nut. I wasn't
Yeah.
built for that. I wasn't going to war with them,
Yeah.
no kind of way.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? But I had to part my ways with Gary, but it was still my homie, you know what I mean? And it was hurting because I know he was hurting, but I didn't have the capacity to be able to get him out of that, what he was going through. And he eventually, you know, he started, I think he started reaching out to others, and that's how this relationship developed with this New York guy, Yalpo, and that's when I really lost him. You know what I mean? I know they connected on because Garrett liked fast cars and stuff like
Yeah.
that, but I lost him.
Wow.
And you know, then I ended up really losing. He lost his life in '91. So it was like and that's when he lost his life. That's when I started to pick up a gun. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Because I just was like, man, we at war. You know what I mean? And that was a mental thing. I was lunching. I'm getting classes up UDC, and I got my junk in my book bag.
Yeah.
Like, why am I taking my book bag to class with me? And I
Yeah.
was hanging over Southeast and stuff like that. And then I started doing some things that I shouldn't have been doing. And guess what?
Yeah.
December 1992, I got shot
Yeah.
for somebody retaliating something against me for something I did.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I spent a whole year in the hospital. I was paralyzed from the neck down, so I spent a whole year in the hospital. So that was at first, because the doctor told me I wasn't gonna be able to walk. So mentally, I took that in. I accepted, oh man, this, you know, this the hand I've been dealt. I was 21 years old.
Yeah.
Like, shit.
I remember
man,
that.
you know
I'm
what
sorry
I mean?
for
So
that.
yeah, I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
But then when I was in DC General, then I went over to the rehab hospital, National Rehab, and you know, had a halo on my head, and they were like, man, you know, we not sure, you know, but if you come down and do therapy every day, you know, we might be able to help you out to get better than you are. And,
Yeah.
I cussed him out. I didn't believe it. I had already accepted I wasn't gonna be able to walk again. I was gonna be in a wheelchair. But I had to psychologically tell myself, this man, I can't see myself being like this the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And
I
I changed
love
my
it.
mindset.
Yeah, that shows like the spirit of resiliency that's inside of you, the metal.
But you gotta be,
Yeah.
it's all up here.
And that brings to a point. So if you, for black men, especially our generation, how many emotions do you think we feel that's natural that a human being can feel? Like, if I were to ask you to count up, like, what do you think is the number that most people think that they are? What would you think they would say?
I would say just from experience, my own personal experience at least, it's gotta be at least about 10 emotions
At least
that
10.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah, I said, I mean, I probably
Different emotions
I
that
wouldn't
I've
even-
dealt with.
happy, sad, mad. I'm saying 6 or 7. I would think that many.
Right.
yeah.
That's how most people think. But there's something that we use to be able to educate individuals, which is called a somatic wheel. And in a somatic wheel, there's many as probably 80 different emotions that a person has. I actually have one right here.
They got a title for it?
Somatic wheel, yes sir, yeah. And so just in being, let's see, angry, there's
Oh, it's
1, 2,
components. It's
3,
like a
4, 5, 6,
outline.
7,
What makes
8,
up anger?
9,
So
10,
like,
11,
okay,
12,
yeah.
13, 14, 15, 16, 17,
Okay,
18,
now I get it.
19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. There are 24, almost 25 different variations of anger that a person has. So like, we'll work with somebody coming home from incarceration, and they say, one of the things I want to work on is my anger. Okay, so how do you help a person
Yeah,
with their
bullet
anger,
points.
right? And so that's hard to do, right? But if you ask them, like, what are some of the feelings that you felt when you were growing up that triggered that provided you or like developed the anger? And the person might say, I felt misunderstood. Okay, so misunderstood is something that you can actually work on. Like if I felt misunderstood, I can work on that. But just if I feel anger, it's harder to work on that. Y'all get that? What you think, Eric?
Well, I think that people have, growing up in DC, I think that people, let's just say they started with a clean slate, and then the environment dictates where they're going with it. So if you're around, like when I grew up, you're around a whole bunch of pistol carriers and shooters. Your body or your mind state might acclimate to what they do to resolve their issues, and it's almost like peer pressure, meaning that somebody rob you, right? The peers are going to be like, man, get your pistol, go get that, go straighten that out. You know what I'm saying? And that's that peer pressure you put on you, where
Especially in Southwest.
right, yeah, that peer pressure on you.
There's some thorough dudes down Southwest, man.
That peer
Respect.
pressure it makes
Yeah.
you feel like the only way to resolve this issue is to eliminate somebody.
Yeah.
And I consider that. I don't consider that necessarily anger. I consider that more like peer pressure.
Yeah.
This is you're emotional, and dude's gonna be like, you gonna just let somebody rob you? You gonna let somebody take that from you? That peer pressure on you. That peer pressure makes you feel like you
Peer
gotta
pressure.
retaliate,
Peer pressure.
Yeah.
or like your
That's
boy,
deep.
like
What I was just talking about?
nah, the one that ran the police station.
Oh, Benny.
Benny. Right, peer
Another
pressure.
story. Yeah, and,
Peer
and-
pressure.
And speaking on Benny, you know, another smart dude, Benny Lee Lawson. For
Yeah.
those who don't know, he shot up the police headquarters back in '94. A suicide mission.
Yeah.
And you know, Benny, we was at UDC together. He he used to tutor me in math.
Yo, smart thugs.
You know what I'm saying? So he come home, he come to my house sometimes after class. So this one particular night, he was getting ready to leave, and you know, Benny, you would, just like me and you talking right now. You know, you ain't see nothing wrong with him. He wasn't, you know, mild-mannered, chilled out. You know what I mean? Funny. It was me and my mother in the house. He, you know, dapped me up, getting ready to leave after he finished with me tutoring and stuff. And he talked to my mother for a little while. Then he got up and kissed my mother on the cheek. All right. He usually would just hug my mother, give her a hug. But he got up and kissed her on the cheek this night. And I thought it was kind of weird, but I didn't think nothing of it. I was like, okay, whatever, Ben. You know what I mean? So I said, I'm going to see you tomorrow. Next day, I turned on the news. This dude then went on a suicide mission and shoot up the police headquarters. No sign.
Yeah.
No mental breakdown. No, it just happened. It was just random, and I had to deal with that.
Yeah, he
But
was
in
like
hindsight, do you think that was peer pressure? Or you think it was just pure
the
anger?
jury is still out. You know, I blame some folks. I've said some things to some folks that, you know, I felt like, you know, that were his peers. That, you know, I felt like, okay, you know, this could have been different. What was y'all? Come on now, y'all know better. Y'all know better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know what the situation was. I can't prove it. Not that I, you know, it's what's done is done. Once somebody, and that's how we grew up. Once somebody is gone, they're gone. You can't bring them back. So what's the point of
no
even?
dwelling on it.
You know what I mean? But yeah, I do know if I would have known or had any kind of idea that this was going on, because I didn't, I would have been able to probably change that dynamic.
Yeah. Death is the price that freedom's costing. Peace to Benny Lee, because he made his own law, son.
Oh, hey, bruh.
Who was
That's
that?
what's up.
Yeah, somebody
That's
I know
what's
who
up,
wrote
bro.
lyrics in the
Local
70s.
uptown dudes?
Yeah, the local uptown
like
dudes,
that.
man. It was
like that,
getting
though.
into some music.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if you think of, you know, that's a deep story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about mental health. We're talking about, really what we're talking about is the trauma. So there's a doctor, psychiatrist, Paul Conti, and he says that trauma moves through society identical to how a pandemic moves through. So if you think of, if I'm around you and I got COVID and we talking and that you get it, right? So if you talking about Southwest growing up and like if somebody gets you, then the idea is that you need to go back and get them.
Conflict resolution, retaliate.
That ties into some real deep stuff. That ties into a human being's nervous system, where like if you take 10 kids, you take 9 kids and put them in a class, and all of them have dealt with physical violence, and they've dealt with physical trauma, and you put another child who's from a Cosby environment, and you put him in that class, then he will develop the same attributes as the other 9. So trauma, the whole concept, like you talk about around violence, you talk about the impact that it had for our community, the 500 murders, like literally, it's on, all of us were affected by that. Like,
Yeah, buddy.
yeah.
I can see that, bro.
It's real when you think about it, and it's like, damn, you know, this is some of the stuff that I wish our older big homies in the neighborhood, the OGs would, you know, been like, hey man, look, you need to go talk to somebody.
Right.
Because they saw us crashing out.
Yeah.
Y'all need to
A
go
lot of them
fight.
saw us, all
Kill
of them
'em.
wasn't incarcerated.
But
A
we
lot
didn't
of them
know.
saw us.
We didn't know.
They didn't know, and we didn't know. Yeah,
We didn't know.
They
That's
knew,
right.
Like I always talk about First and Kennedy, that block. We saw the transition. First and Kennedy, when I was younger, growing up, like between 13 and 16 years old, it was about getting money down there. You know, it was getting money. Then it was a crew that came in down there that was all about. They was about getting money, but they was also about violence.
protecting the
You know
the
what
square.
I'm saying? The older homies, it was some older homies that
Yeah.
could have stopped that, but they didn't. So that's why
Yeah.
I be talking about, I'm always saying, and holding ourselves accountable. We need to be able to do that more. And that's connected, I believe that's connected to mental health too. That balance that we was just, goodness gracious, you know what I mean? All of us, you know, some people will say, okay, you violent because you like to fight all the time. Yeah, but at least.
Yeah,
the
but that's
people
not-
either
that's-
you live another day.
That's the difference.
You understand what I'm saying?
You might get
Yeah.
some lumps and bruises, but you ain't
come
dead.
on, man.
Yeah.
You ain't in a
And
casket.
there's somebody's
Imagine riding
fight, man.
around. We in D.C. You riding around every day. You listen to PGC back in the day.
Yeah.
So and so. I'll never forget. I heard about 4 or 5 people dying that I knew personally. I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah.
That's
I
so
mean,
and so.
it be something big. I mean, I
You
hate to say
remember
it,
back
but
then, you remember back then, Thax, you ain't need, you know how jokers be saying paperwork now? You ain't need no paperwork. All somebody had to do was think you was hot.
And it was
think you
on.
was telling, nigga, it's over.
Yeah.
Like your days were numbered. You know,
Yeah.
that was that's why it was so many, that murder rate was like that.
yeah.
Stuff like
But
that.
back then too, the murder rate was strictly in correlation with the drug trade.
Yeah.
Most of those murders back then were strict correlation with the drug trade, whether it was dirty business or some other shit. It was a lot of was
Yeah.
a lot of
For
was
sure.
associated with the
It
drug
started in
trade.
86.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the resolve. That's the way you
That's
resolve
how
that
they resolved
versus-
it.
That's
You know
it.
what I mean?
With so what we're talking about is complex trauma, and
Mm-hmm.
we're bringing complex trauma into the conversation of what we experienced in '86 and through the '90s, through the 2000s, and even looking at this new generation. So based off of our experiences and watching what happened in '86 and through, I won't even say through '98. What type of impact? What was the loss? And how did it help impact the mental health of these youngers today?
Oh man, there's a lot of fatherless kids. A lot of fatherless kids who definitely need that direction now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Let me see, I'm 56, so that means 26, that was half, 23, 27. Yeah, it's a lot of fatherless kids. I wouldn't say they're kids anymore anyway. Some of them are young adults. But a lot of them fathers either are incarcerated or are dead. And that directly that directly affects the people who are growing up now, you know what I'm saying? That who are fatherless and don't have that direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's facts. Yeah,
Okay.
I do that. And
Okay.
Lorton babies. The Lorton.
Yeah.
And just think about the
Imagine going out
The
to
mother of
family
that
day. That's
child.
when you saw your father, family day.
Yeah.
Crazy.
think about the mother of that child. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? They dealing with the trauma. They might not have been with the father, but they still loved him.
Okay.
You know, and they know that's the father of your child. You
Yeah.
know, so it's like they might not have got help.
Right.
Yeah,
you
they
know, for
traumatized
that
too.
trauma.
Yes.
As I mentioned before, that like when you talk about trauma being able to be translated and carried from one person to another, right? Similar to how COVID is, right? If you think of what was Moderna and that stuff that we would get,
Oh, the
Pfizer.
jab. The jab.
Pfizer.
the J, what was
COVID.
that? COVID.
COVID.
What was it called? Like the thing that we do,
Oh, the vaccine?
the
Vaccine.
vaccine.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So also healing in our community can move like a vaccine.
No, oh, yeah. Man.
Okay, so like the end part of this whole thing about back then when, and we're talking about the experiences and the trauma that we went through. What's the answer? How do we become a part of the vaccine? How does our generation of black men become a part of the vaccine for the next generation?
Consistency. You know, so much of what we do, and we spoke on the grant hustlers before. We might have, you know, a event or two in the community, you know, and bringing the youth out and doing this and doing that. But that might be that one thing, and we're not staying consistent with those youth that we are supposed to be helping. Like you got it's really a village because you got to stay in touch. It's not your child,
Yeah.
but you got to stay in touch with them.
That's
You
right.
gotta call them, check on them every other day. Like, what you doing in school? What you did today? You go to work today? We need that village concept back
That's
for it
what I
to
was gonna
spread
say.
like that. And we need that in numbers. We need more of us
Yeah.
in numbers to be able to do this. It's enough of us. Even if with the homies that's coming home
That's
that did
right.
those bids, they need to get involved.
That's
we
right.
need a whole front line.
Okay,
But
we're wrapping up our time right now, but I want to
Also
give
think-
both of you guys a shot.
I also
Yes.
think it starts in the home. I think that
Absolutely.
as a father, you got to make sure your unit is tight.
Yeah.
Meaning that you can't be out here dictating to other people's kids unless your home is tight out as it is. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
That's right.
So you got to make sure, if you make sure that your kids stay crime free, off the pole, you know, all that kind of stuff, you're doing your job as a parent, and that's where it starts. You know, that nucleus of your family is where you start at, and then hopefully your kids can carry it on out into the world by setting examples of this is how we do it, or this is what I learned from my parents, as you know, when I grew up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to what I'm saying. The biggest thing is the village, but I'm gonna go back to, we know kids grow up faster nowadays. Like kids are smarter, right? We know because of computers, right? We also know that Instagram and all these other things are helping kids become more active in other things. You get what I'm saying?
Perverted in all kinds of stuff.
They're seeing a lot of stuff that we didn't see.
Man,
we was
we
out there,
didn't
but we didn't see this stuff.
Like,
we didn't
man,
do the things in
out of control.
these youngers can do that are advanced at it, and they're good at it.
Yeah,
The scammers, these youngers 15, 16, scamming people.
They sharp.
Yeah.
So where I'm going with, I just think it's the village, man. Control what your
Control.
kids do, man. And
Yeah.
Everybody knows what we supposed to be doing. You just gotta like look in the mirror, man up.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we wrapping up our last this episode here, and you know, naturally, the things that I want to just leave out to the group is, if you have any issues or challenges with your health, and particularly your mental health, find resources. There's a lot out there, and I also want to challenge and encourage every one of us to realize that we are a part of the healing. So, you know, work on yourself and become an agent of change and hope and promise for those who are behind you. I hope this episode was able to touch and reach somebody, those who need support. So thank you again, you all. Good night.
Peace out.
Good night.